I am currently ranked 300,000 in the world, and with 2 free transfers available going into game week 13, the goal of getting top 50k before Christmas is on. And in today's video, I will be revealing my game week 13 team selection, as I absolutely will be making transfers. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like, aiming for 200 on this video. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, a quick review on how Game Week 12 went, because we had that Monday night game between West Ham and Newcastle, and that was the icing on the cake for this game week. Somehow managed to get a Fabianski clean sheet. I was not expecting that at all, and it meant I finished on 71 points for the game week. My one transfer that I made was Trent to Gabriel. Really happy with that move, as the Arsenal clean sheet I think is going to be a regular thing over the next month. However, those that missed it, Gabriel did limp off of an injury during the Champions League game, so we do need to keep an eye on that on Friday. But that's left me, as I mentioned, with an overall rank of 302,000. Since that game week 10 wildcard, it has been 4 green arrows in a row, and I feel like we can continue that trend going into game week 13 and beyond. In terms of the rest of the players, of course, we have a few issues. Anderson went off of a hamstring injury. Raul Jimenez getting those minutes earlier and earlier each and every game. I do think that is a problem in my team. And of course, Vissa playing 70 minutes, but Thiago now available means that I think Vissa's time could be at risk going forward. And of course, with no Bukayo Saka, the question is it time to get rid of Son, who I felt was a great differential for Man City, and an assist and 6 pointers is great, but when Saka does the business like he done in game week 12, it feels like only inevitable that I got to bring Saka into my team at one particular time. All those things we'll discuss in today's video, and of course look at the projected goals for game week 13, so let's get into that now. So as I discussed, with 2 free transfers available and about 1.4 million in the bank, I've got lots of flexibility going into game week 13, and one of the big decisions I spoke about in my transfer plan video is going to be, do I sell Son and bring in Bukayo Saka? Now, during my wildcard 10, I had this deliberation, Son versus Saka. I went for Son, and on reflection, it was the wrong move, but we live and learn. And that's the big thing right now going into game week 13. Do I have to make this transfer this week? So in terms of the underlying numbers, I've touched on this in the transfer plan video. Make sure you check that out if you haven't already. But the general understanding is that Saka is better for both goal creation and goal scoring, and he's a monster on the bonus points, playing for a more consistent team in Arsenal. So when you add all those things together, bringing in Bukayo Saka is just going to be an inevitable thing at some point. And in terms of the eye test, because I really like to balance both the eye test and the underlying numbers, I watched the Man City Spurs game and I thought Spurs were unbelievable. But funny enough, the one player that I kept saying was actually hurting Spurs was Son. He was giving away the ball in bad areas. He didn't really look at the level of Maddison, Kulusevski and Solanke. He actually looked a level below, which is really unusual. And I don't think Son's minutes in terms of a start are at risk at all. But we are still seeing him get substituted early. It feels like he is the one out of that front four that will come off, which is unusual being the captain in the team. And at 9.9 million, if I don't have that certainty of minutes, then he just can't be an option for me in the long term. The big thing is game week 13 a great time to keep him? Fulham at home, on reflection, conceding 4 goals against Wolves, and the potential injury to Anderson, and Spurs' general form at home is fantastic, means that it is actually a decent differential to own for this specific game week. And when we look at Saka's fixture away against West Ham, I know they put up that brilliant performance against Newcastle, but I still back Arsenal to get the victory against West Ham. But as I mentioned, the big thing right now is Son actually predicted to score more points than Saka in game week 13? And I'd probably say it's pretty bang on even. The one thing obviously that Saka has is that set piece threat. Those corners going on to Gabriel's head is always going to be a threat that Son doesn't really possess. And in terms of the long term, I look at the fixtures and think, I just want Arsenal in. There are a few fixtures like Southampton away that Son could be good for, but all in all, this is a scary period not to own Bukayo Saka. So I need to weigh up the balance of bringing Saka in for this game, we could just be done with it, because if he has another good game week 13, his price will continue to rise. Or do I think game week 13 is actually a great time to keep Son for one final game week, try and jump on some differential points, know that I will then sell him for Saka in game week 14. Still a decision that I need to make, but I will touch on my team selection where I am leaning towards. So another thing that is so important when we are making transfers going into game week 13 in particular is the fixtures. Now, fixtures are king, even more so over this Christmas period. And I just want to quickly highlight that with these fixtures you can see on the screen here. So I have taken game week 13, which of course is this weekend, up until game week 18. Now, you're probably sat there thinking, bloody hell, Nacho, why are you looking at a 6-game week period? That is miles in the future. And you'd be wrong. You'd be very wrong because, of course, game week 13 is going to be this weekend. Game week 18 is Boxing Day. So we've got 6 game weeks between now and game week 18 and Boxing Day, which is ridiculous. Now, just to highlight some of those fixtures in terms of midweek and weekend, game week 14 are midweek fixtures. So we've got this on the weekend, and then we've got Tuesday and Wednesday games for game week 14. We also, in game week 18, of course, are the Boxing Day fixtures that we need to acknowledge, because then after that, game week 19, which are not on the screens, is going to be 29th of December, 30th, and the 1st. So it's going to be carnage. There are so many games. And on top of that, for the big teams, we've also got Champions League football still happening. Take Arsenal, for example. They've got the Champions League alongside Man City and Arsenal between game weeks 15 and game week 16. So Champions League between then. And we've also got the EFL Cup quarter-final, which is probably just a pain in the ass for these teams right now, between game week 16 and 17. So take Arsenal, for example. They're going to have a Champions League fixture. So basically their fixture is going to go Fulham, Champions League, Everton, EFL Cup quarter-final, Crystal Palace. It's a ridiculous run. And just to highlight some of the teams that have EFL Cup games, that's going to be Spurs versus United, Southampton versus Liverpool, Arsenal versus Palace, and Newcastle versus Brentford. So we need to remember these things, that there are going to be quarterfinals that teams want to win. Yes, a lot of them do have squad depth. Now, in terms of just looking at the teams, like we've got this in terms of order, and you can see a bit of a trend here that some of the quote-unquote weaker teams are at the top of this list. And that's really important for me, because where can we identify the talisman in those quote-unquote weaker teams? And you can see Brighton at the top. Have no involvement in cup games, no European football, just the Premier League to contend with. And that is why a certain João Pedro is on everybody's lips right now, because I do think he's a bit of a talisman. Yes, there will be times where he comes off early, but I think more than not, he will start and he will be essential to Brighton during this Christmas period. So we got to identify these talisman players, because it's all about minutes over this festive period. So João Pedro from Brighton, Cunha from Wolves, Semenyo once he's back from his suspension at Bournemouth, and Jarrod Bowen at West Ham. Palmer at Chelsea and Alexander Isak at Newcastle. If we are looking at those top teams, there is one player from each one that I think can come into our teams at really good value and not disrupt the structure of our teams. Now, when we take it a little bit further down, teams that I just don't care about having crazy fixtures is going to be Arsenal. Yes, they are middling. They have Champions League and EFL Cup, but for me, the defence is a priority. So get yourself those defenders. I already have Gabriel. Hence why I also probably want Saka in the attack. Brentford, a little bit of a concern because the fixtures are middling and they do have the EFL Cup. And I'm struggling, apart from Mbeumo, to think who is going to be a guaranteed minute in that team. Liverpool, also a slight concern because they have Champions League. Although they're doing really well, they probably can put a second string team out. And they've got EFL Cup. And I would argue some of these are really tricky games. Man City followed by Newcastle away, Spurs away. Is there an argument to get rid of Salah? I think there's actually an argument not to buy Salah right now if you don't own, but that is for another video. And the rest of the teams, I think it's probably time for me to ship out Fulham, hence why Raul Jimenez is on the radar to get rid of. And also, long-term, the fixtures of Spurs, not amazing. Of course, we need to remember that we have got Europa League for them in the EFL Cup, and Son's minutes are a little bit ropey at times. So I just wanted to quickly reflect on this, because it's really important to identify the talismanic figures. And for me, in terms of my team, I'm looking at João Pedro and I'm looking at Bukayo Saka. Now that we've looked at those long-term fixtures, let's just quickly take a look at game week 13. Now, this has become a little bit of a regular theme. Shout out to RobTFPL. absolutely give him a follow over on Twitter / Blue Sky, wherever you do. This is all of his stuff. But these are the projected goals and clean sheets taken from SpreadX. So in terms of the bookies, betting markets, and I always feel that's a decent, reliable place to look at some projected goals and clean sheets. So I just want to quickly go through the games and those teams that are in particular I'm looking to buy. So first up, wow. When you look at the Brighton-Southampton game, as a guy who doesn't have João Pedro, that is concerning. 2.45 projected goals. João Pedro, we're expecting to start this game. We know he's on penalties. I feel like he is going to be an incredible option. And it makes you think, if you have a forward that you're not happy with, a Raul Jimenez, a Calvert-Lewin, going to someone like a João Pedro just makes complete sense. And 36% chance of a clean sheet. So João Pedro, if you can get him in, I think you just get him in. Brentford versus Leicester. Now, this is another one. I'm a manager that has both Vissa and Mbeumo and a Brentford defender. 2.05 projected goals. I think that is not too bad at all. They always create big chances, and I think if you have Mbeumo, you have Vissa. Unless you're scared of Vissa's minutes being rotated, you probably do just start them. The big deliberation for me is there a world where I can sell Vissa to bring in João Pedro? And I think the answer probably is no right now, but we will touch on that. Leicester, 1.18, but with the imminent signing of Van Nistelrooy, that might have a slight uptick. In terms of Palace Newcastle, if you have Isak, I wouldn't panic. I would just start him. Palace a little bit ropey defensively, and it looks like that is going to be a score-draw game or just in Newcastle's favour. Forest Ipswich. Now, a lot of people worried about Chris Wood. If you own him, please just play him. I think he's a great option. A lot of us have short-term bias. Wood has been consistent for Forest, and if he scores, he grabs bonus. But if you have a Forest defender, I think you start him. 38% chance of a clean sheet. Wolves versus Bournemouth. Nobody was expecting a clean sheet in this game. It may happen. I think you play your attacking Wolves assets like Aït-Nouri, Cunha, but you also play your Bournemouth players. In terms of Arsenal versus West Ham, now 2.15 projected goals is very good away from home. And as a guy who doesn't have Saka right now is a slight concern. I need to assess whether that is going to be important enough to bring him in. And of course, West Ham at 0.88 projected goals is really poor. If you have Arsenal players, you start all of them. Chelsea Villa, again, hence why managers attempt to buy Cole Palmer as captaincy, 2.1 projected goals. And of course, Villa played in the Champions League. Chelsea play in the Europa League. But let's be honest, they are not going to be playing their proper team. In that, it will be a second string team. So they should be fresh going into that game. And I think that's enough projected goals there to suggest Palmer is still a great captaincy for our teams. Now, the big one for me is going to be Man United. 2.05 projected goals and a 40% chance of a clean sheet. I have Dalot. I have Garnacho. Now, part of me thinks absolute start Dalot, that's a no-brainer. But can I also start Garnacho? Because if I don't start him in this game week and he does well, I only have myself to blame. So I need to assess that. Spurs versus Fulham. Again, another reason why maybe keeping Son for one game week is actually decent. 2.25 projected goals. Fulham have goals in them, but I would still start my Spurs defenders if you have them. But as you can see, 2.25, another reason why I want to keep Son. Finally, Liverpool versus City, 1.85 projected goals. Not the same level as that of like a Cole Palmer, for example, or a Bukayo Saka, or even a Bruno Fernandes in terms of the team. But we know if Liverpool are going to win this game against City, Salah is going to be at the heart of it. On penalties, incredible form, City all over the place defensively. All comes down to captaincy, what you want to do. But I think for Liverpool right now, you obviously play all your assets and you probably play Haaland as well. But if you have Haaland, I think you probably sell him. So to conclude, I'm scared not to have João Pedro. That is worrying seeing those projected goals. However, players that I have in my team, Vissa looks great for this week. I think Son looks like a great differential in terms of Spurs as a whole. And in terms of captaincy, Palmer is still a fantastic pick in our teams. Right then, coming into my Game Week 13 team selection. And just to remind you, 1.4 million in the bank, 2 free transfers available and aiming to crack that top 50k before Christmas. So in terms of the goalkeeper and defence, they pick themselves. Sells at home against Ipswich, based on what we saw in terms of the clean sheet odds, I think is a brilliant pick. Yes, Fabianski has been my GOAT over the last couple of weeks, but Sells is always coming in for this fixture. It's worth noting, I think Ipswich are a good team, but I back Forest this weekend. So no problems with the goalkeeper selection. I can sleep well at night picking this team. And in terms of the back three as well, now Vandenberg, VDB there that you can see, has a decent fixture at home against Leicester, but I just cannot, firstly, play a back four in any game week because the defenders just don't offer value. And secondly, I can't be benching Aït-Nouri. I just cannot. If you have him in your team for a home game against Bournemouth with no Semenyo, it's a no-brainer. You start Aït-Nouri and you just hope you get on board with that monster haul that will happen at some point inevitably. And I really am hoping for some differential points from Diogo Dalot. I think managers are too scared to go for Man United. I went for them a wild card. I need to get some Dalot points just to justify the pick. And I do think he is a good pickup if he does start as wing back once again. The big concern, of course, is the yellow flag for Gabriel. Now, some reports say that it was just precautionary. They brought him off and they saw him laughing on the bench. Others think it's all doom and gloom. For me, I actually think it's quite a good thing that he's flagged. Because I wildcarded, I've got decent strength and depth for my team. So Vandenberg at home against Leicester, worst case scenario, comes on for Gabriel. There's no world where Gabriel, for example, doesn't start and comes on. So for example, he isn't going to be on the bench and comes on for the last 10 minutes. He either starts or he gets 0 minutes. So if you own Gabriel, just start him in your team and hope for the best, unless we get news from Arteta that he's ruled out long term. But I do not think that'll be the case at all. Moving into my Game Week 13 midfielders, and it's worth noting I haven't made the transfer yet, but I got to put at least on screens what I'm planning on doing. So I missed all of the price changes of Saka at the start of the weekend. I was busy doing stuff. Sometimes other things come ahead of FPL. I do hate to say that in front of you guys. So I am planning to do Son to Saka. I really do think this game week is a brilliant opportunity to have Son for some differential points. However, do I also think Saka is a phenomenal option? I do. And do I think even if Son has a great game week, could Saka match it? I think he can. And for that reason, I think with 2 free transfers available, and because of the Christmas period being so hectic, and I know Saka is just absolutely locked in for minutes. And I know Arsenal are on this little bit of a trajectory right now where I feel like they are just going to continue to be better and better and better. I just need a piece of that attack and the most talismanic figure in that attack. And it's going to be Bukayo Saka. So I was going to do it last week. We had no confirmed news that Saka was fit, so I held off. I don't know if I can put myself through the pain once again of Son versus Saka. So I think I'm just going to get it done and just accept that if Son gets those differential points, it is what it is. In terms of the other three, Mbeumo at home against Leicester could be the final straw for him. I know a lot of managers are getting a little bit restless, but I do think it's a brilliant option, even though there might be a new manager bounce at Leicester. You've got to start Mbeumo. Palmer at home against Aston Villa, obviously you keep and you start, and maybe captain, we'll come on to that. And Mo Salah, of course, at home against Man City. I think it's a good fixture. I don't think it's an incredible fixture. I'm not there yet in terms of other managers thinking Liverpool will win 4-5-0. I'm not there just yet. However, the problem, of course, with this structure, and spoiler alert, there will be another transfer made most likely, means that I'm pushing Garnacho to the bench. And I got to ask myself the question, if I brought Garnacho in on a wildcard and I'm not starting him at home against Everton, then why do I have him in the team? And that is the only conundrum that I have with these potential transfers is I'm forcing Garnacho to the bench. Now, some people think that that is a good move because Garnacho's minutes, we cannot predict them. But the fact that he started in Emerim's first game, and I thought Garnacho did absolutely fine, had chances to score, and it wasn't like he was a complete nobody on the pitch, is a little bit of a scary prospect, especially when we saw those projected goals. The only thing that I got to say is, one, we could just see an early substitution because Amorim's trying to understand what players can play the system. So I think he could give minutes to Mason Mount on the 70th minute. And for that reason, I just think there's too much risk right now with Garnacho to start him. And if he does well, I can just say to myself, well, at least I've got him in the team for the long term if I feel like I want to keep him. So that's the plan right now. Let's take a look at the forwards because, of course, there is another transfer I'm planning to make. So as you can see with my second free transfer and why Garnacho has been pushed to the bench is I'm planning to bring in João Pedro. Now again, I had a nightmare in the weekend because as I said, I was doing stuff. Sometimes FPL isn't first and Raul Jimenez fell in price and João Pedro rose in price. That was painful. That was a real swing when we talk about price swings. However, Raul Jimenez is a problem. I do think there are game weeks where he absolutely can come in. For example, game week 14 looks terrible for my team, but I do think Raul Jimenez actually is a good option for that week, but I have no guarantees that he might lose his place eventually. The minutes are getting less and less each and every game week, and he isn't putting those goals away, even though he is getting the chances still. So Raul Jimenez to João Pedro, while the same price, just feels like an absolute upgrade. And yes, it is going to give me a benching problem for my team, but I just feel like I have to get it done with one of my free transfers because I spoke about it. During this festive period, Brighton are a team to target because they have no other cup involvement and they don't have European football. And I think João Pedro is absolutely a talisman in this Brighton team. The only thing I will say is he isn't at the level of Cunha in terms of guaranteed minutes. I do think there'll be games where he comes off early. That's just how it is. But playing in this Brighton team right now, I just feel like he can deliver in any game week. Yes, he is overperforming his underlying numbers, but he just has that dog in him where I just feel like he can go off at any moment. And he really is a big game player, I feel, in any fixture. And with that home game against Southampton on a Friday night, I know it could be painful because if I bring him in and he blanks, then it is obviously a bad start to the game week. But I also feel like he could really do well in that game. So for me, Raul Jimenez and João Pedro will cause big problems for my team in terms of benching headaches. But I'd rather have that problem than be sat there complaining about Raul Jimenez each and every week while João Pedro's price continues to rise. So Raul Jimenez to Pedro is the plan. I will keep Vissa. I just can't bring myself to sell him for that home game against Leicester. I think it's brilliant. Then we can reassess Vissa later down the line, as I do think he will be a problem for my team. So that's how the team's looking for game week 13. No transfers made. I'm going to wait until the next batch of price changes and then I'll pull the trigger. But I am 80% sure I will make those moves. Last decision, of course, is captain. So finally, captaincy. And this feels like a very big week. I think the team looks fantastic. I think I could get a green arrow with this team, even if Gabriel is injured. As I said, I've got the bench. But captaincy feels really big because there is such a divide. We got people going for Salah. We got people going for Cole Palmer. We got people going crazy like Bruno Fernandes. We probably still got people going for Erling Haaland. And then you got people like Saka, Cunha. The list is endless. Even some people will go for João Pedro, I'm sure of it. But I'm too scared to do that with a Friday night game. That'll be real pain if that was to blank. So right now, I know I mentioned that I'm not there yet in terms of Liverpool beating City 4-5-6-0 like some people are predicting. I do not see that right now. However, I still think he is the captaincy pick for me. Seeing Man City implode against Feyenoord midweek is just kind of compounding things right now. I think if Man City comfortably won 3-0 against Feyenoord, I think I probably would slightly change the narrative in my head. But seeing that game, seeing what we saw in the weekend, and just seeing Liverpool beat Real Madrid pretty comfortably and just see how established they are as a team right now, I don't need a Liverpool 4-0 victory. I think we just need a Liverpool 2-0, a Liverpool 3-0, and I think Salah's going to be at the heart of all of that good stuff. So for that reason right now, I'm backing a Liverpool win, and I'm backing them to win by 2 goals. And for that reason, the captaincy is going to go with Mo Salah. I do think Cole Palmer is a fantastic option, and I'm not 100% there yet with Mo Salah because Palmer feels like the higher ceiling. If I was to say to you right now, someone in this team gets a hat-trick, then it is going to be Cole Palmer. So I just need to weigh that up right now because, of course, Villa playing Champions League, I feel like they're always a little bit fatigued after those games. But right now, I just feel a bit safe putting the captaincy on Mo Salah. Maybe I'll change my mind. And, of course, someone like an Mbeumo, I feel like recently what we've seen with him is starting to scare us off a little bit. We need to cast our minds back, promote a team at home. Mbeumo usually bangs in those fixtures. So we need to reassess this, but right now the captaincy on Salah, vice captaincy on Palmer, but it's such a great week for captaincy. Let me know who yours is in the comment section. Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 13 team selection video. I'm actually really excited about this game week because whenever you have 2 free transfers and a plan to make them, it always is exciting. And it's such a busy fixture schedule right now. With the Christmas period, it's no better time than subscribe to the channel. And of course, like this video if you did enjoy it because we have got a lot going on over the next few weeks. Let me know any questions in the comment section and I will see you tomorrow for another video. Take care. Cheers.